Hey. Oh, yeah. Spent like a whole month being sick. It was unbearable.
Flu.
Might have an 18-month-old.
Yeah, I know. All right, let's call the meeting to order. Before we do that, can you hear us, Tom?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
On the side. It is a gallery view. Oh, that's all.
Oh, maybe it's set to. Okay, maybe it's just set to whoever's not sharing their camera is out.
All right. Quick. Now we can call the meeting to order.
Call the meeting to order. Tanya, could you establish quorum?
Yes. Commissioner Hecht.
Here.
Let the record show that Commissioner Hecht is attending virtually. Commissioner Nee.
Yeah.
Commissioner Liu.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Van Rees.
Here.
And Chair Mind.
Here.
And let the record show that Commissioner Whedon is absent or not here yet. And we have a quorum.
Right, do we have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
One comment.
Here.
You want to take that?
You speak from here so we can see you.
Okay.
Today.
Gary Hedden, Los Altos resident and active member with Greentown Los Altos. I've got 3 items that I want to share with you about Greentown activities. We do the summer internship program. We've done that for 7 or 8 years now. This year we have 2 internships. One is on sustainable urban landscapes. I'll be the mentor on that one. And there will be some of the application forms are going to go out in a couple of days. We start in June and end in July, and I hope to be able to have the students give a presentation to the commission. I know you don't have a meeting in July, but maybe we can do something in August. The second internship is Green State Changemaker, Community and Climate Action. Mentor for that is Jane Packard, who is managing the Apricot Ocean. And the third item I want to share with you is the Arbor Day celebration that's coming up on April 25th at 4 o'clock in Lincoln Park. We're celebrating Arbor Day, and we're also celebrating that we achieved 500 trees with the Greentown 500 Trees campaign. In fact, I'm still planting trees. I haven't quite given it up yet. I think by the end of this month, I will quit, and it'll be at number 538.
That's great.
So you're all invited. It is a Friday, and I picked that time because then some of the volunteers who will help me who go to school can attend. And then also it turns out that's the day of the State of the Cities, and the 2 mayors are going to be busy at noon. But Pete Daly said, I'll be back at 4 o'clock to say something. It's It's Friday, April 25th. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Gary. Anyone else? Okay, let's move on, meeting minutes. Margaret,
Do you want to just, does anyone have any changes or edits to the minutes?
No.
No.
I move to approve the meeting minutes from February 12th.
Second.
Okay, I take a vote since we have someone virtually. Commissioner Hecht,
Yes.
Commissioner Nee,
Yes.
Commissioner Liu,
Yes.
Vice Chair Ben Reese,
Yes.
and Chair Ryan.
Yes.
All right, the minutes are passed.
Okay. We move on to discussion items, and we are so fortunate to have Dr. Rick Lamont here and to talk about ecosystem restoration. And do you want to make an intro?
Yeah, I'll give a brief introduction. Yes, Dr. Rick Lamont is here. Past president of the North Sierra Clara Resource Conservation District, current associate director, and a longtime Los Altos resident, and has over 130 peer-reviewed scientific publications in medicine and ecology published. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to highlight, but I think that shows you're an expert.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Do you want to pull the slides up? We bought our house in 1985. Well, we bought a house, and then moved 2 years later, but we moved to Los Altos in 1985. And now we live in the old Van Buren house on Van Buren Street. And we bought it from an 80-year-old man named Herb Bickle. Bruce Bauer Lumber used to be his lumberyard, Bickle Brothers. Behind our house is Adobe Creek, and he said he used to fly fish in that creek until the 1950s when it started to dry up. It also got cemented up basically from the bay up to El Camino Real at that time. It turned into a flood control channel, which fish cannot swim against, which I'll show you a slide. But I thought since my retirement from cancer in medicine and genomics, returned to my passion in historical ecology, and have now published 10 papers, basically looking at our historical flora and fauna, which I believe can help us guide rewilding and restoring biodiversity here in Los Altos, which I've been very interested in for a long time. My 5 sons and I have planted 1,750 trees. You got to get slaves to work for you like I have. It works there. And when they don't get you a present and they give you a little ticket that says, I'll give you a day of free labor. We did. But my latest paper, and perhaps the most important, which I hope will come out as a preprint online in just a couple of days, will be modeling where we could plant redwoods in Santa Clara County to sequester carbon. Really, I think perhaps the most important thing I've published in ecology. But let's talk about historical ecology and Adobe Creek and Los Altos first, and then let's talk about trees, creeks and then trees. That makes sense? Small group, so just interrupt me as if you have questions or corrections. I love this quote by Thomas Paine, that we have a long habit of not thinking a thing wrong makes us eventually believe that it's a right thing. And then people start to even defend this wrong-headed thinking. We can click ahead, please, Tanya.
60 seconds.
Thomas Paine.
Absorb this quote a little
He does
longer.
that to me all the time. So Adobe Creek. How could Herb Bickle have caught steelhead trout in Adobe Creek until the 1950s? Well, this is one of 3 Los Altos streams. They all originate on Black Mountain, Adobe Creek here in the north, our border with Palo Alto, Permanente Creek, the other main creek called Permanente Creek because Henry Kaiser lived on Black Mountain on Permanente. Well, the Spanish named it Permanente Creek because it was perennial flow. It never stopped flowing. But Henry Kaiser lived up on it, and Kaiser Permanente was actually named for the creek. The other creek would be Stevens Creek, which is east of Los Altos, as you know. It was the Cupertino. The Black Mountain's an interesting mountain. It's actually higher than Skyline Ridge. It has sort of traveled forward with north with the fault. Adobe Creek's 14 miles long, sources at about 2,600 feet, ends in the Palo Alto Baylands where it joins Matadero Creek, which comes down Page Mill Road. This creek links our cities and our communities together. Los Altos Hills, Los Altos, Palo Alto. And we still have certain perennial reaches on Adobe Creek and Permanente Creek that basically from Foothill to 280, it's perennial and always flowing, even in the driest years, which is a requirement for steelhead trout because the young, after they're born, usually will summer in fresh water till they get large enough to go back out to the ocean. Next slide, please. So there were lawsuits filed against water diversions in the early 1900s. Donald McDonald wrote about this in his great book, Early Los Altos and Los Altos Hills. But one was Shout. He was suing the landowners upstream. All his rhododendrons were dying that he had planted down around Adobe Creek because it was going dry in the summer. Many oral histories of year-round flows until around the 1950s, just like Herb Bickett. The Duveneks described it in their writings as well at Hidden Villa. Next slide, please. In the Sportsman's Gazetteer in 1877, they said, between San Mateo and Santa Clara, there are several small streams where fishing may be enjoyed. They were talking about fly fishing for trout, the Adobe, San Francisco Creek, Stevens Creek, and Saratoga Creek. Next slide. John Otterbein Snyder was a ichthyologist, a professor of zoology at Stanford. David Starr Jordan, besides being a racist and the first president of Stanford, was also an ichthyologist, and he hired a bunch of fish biologists. But he, so that he collected steelhead trout from these streams. It took me a while to realize that the name of our creek, Adobe Creek, in 1905 was San Antonio Creek, not Adobe Creek. But finally get to put this together, and he's describing it. We lost his collections because the Stanford Museum of Natural History and the California Academy of Sciences, they were destroyed in the 1906 earthquake. The museums were destroyed. San Francisco, the California Academy lost their whole collection. Some of Stanford's collection survived. And in 1908, when California Academy of Sciences rebuilt, Stanford decided not to rebuild their Natural History Museum. Stanford gave what was left of the zoology collection to California Academy of Sciences. Next slide, please. These are just some oral histories. Herb Bickle I mentioned. Wendell Roscoe, who developed Pink Horse Ranch. We did an Adobe Creek tour. Actually, Green Foothill sponsored it, and I sort of emceed the tour. But he described a 24-incher that's on between his legs. This would be above Foothill College. That was in 2012. He was 94 years old when he told me that story. Next slide.
Well, I had a couple of stories. I also lived right off Adobe Creek. Some of the neighbors who grew up there said, we used to go tubing down the creek. A lot of the water came up to a certain level. Yeah. Longer and longer periods of being dry, even since the last 12 years we've moved there.
So we had this Christmas week flood in 1955, and they start armoring our creeks so that the water will go out to the bay faster. The problem is with that flat concrete bottom, the creek is accelerated. It's basically a sheet of water, and no fish can swim against it anymore. So instead of a dam being a barrier, it's basically this sheet of water, this high velocity water that's the barrier. Next slide, please. And I called the water district, Santa Clara Valley. Well, how could, Herb Bickle told me about these trout. Now I'm starting to find these older old-timer stories and sportsman's sketches. No, they were never here. Okay, next slide, please. And so one of the reasons they were never here is we have this 1899 map, and you see Madero Creek, Adobe Creek doesn't reach the bay. Wow, it comes pretty close to the bay. What about at high water? All these creeks all dried up before they reached the bay. So then, next slide, please. I get an 1862 map, and it's kind of hard to see, but where the red arrow points, Adobe Creek actually joins San Francisco Creek and does reach the bay. So on and off, it may have lost its connection, but steelhead trout, when they're landlocked, they take a form called rainbow trout, and they can persist and reproduce indefinitely until they have access to outmigrate again, and when those higher waters are a better connection. So next slide, please. I electrofished the creek with Rob Leidy. He's standing in the middle. Rob Leidy, Dr. Leidy, has written more about steelhead trout in the bay than anyone, and basically he carries a huge battery backpack, zaps the water, paralyzes the fish for just a couple of seconds. You have to net them quickly. We would measure them, and we found no steelhead trout, even in the perennial reaches above Redwood Grove, basically from the Manresa Bridge at the Jesuit Retreat up to Foothill. It's perennial. We didn't find. We found 3 other native fish there, which when you find them, Sacramento sucker, California roach, and 3 spotted stickleback. When you find those 3, you almost always find steelhead, but we didn't. But where they're standing is right below El Camino Real, where there's about a 10-foot drop, which they're standing on, which of course no fish could climb, and there's a fish ladder on the far right. This was built in the 50s or 60s. So I called the water strip. Like, if there were never trout in the creek, why'd you build the fish ladder? Now that fish ladder doesn't work. It's always, and no fish can get to it because they can't swim against that sheet of water to even get this far up, but it's always clogged. It's never functional. Next slide, please. When I finally figured out, after searching the databases, the Adobe Creek old name was San Antonio Creek, and I figured out that the scientific name for steelhead trout, rainbow trout, is different now. It's Oncorhynchus micus, and back in the day, it was, in the 1890s, it was Salmo irideus. When I finally figured out to search on those older terms, boom. Thoburn, who's a professor at Stanford, there's 3 steelhead trout from Adobe Creek in a jar at the California Academy of Sciences that came to them by way of the wrecked Stanford Museum of Natural History into the rebuilt California Academy of Sciences in 1908. Those are the only 2 museums we had in California, and we lost them both in 1960, almost all of our zoology. So we sort of are behind in terms of really understanding what our historical flora and fauna used to be. Next slide, please. So what does this mean? What should we do? If you look at history, people basically have turned our perennial creek into a seasonal one. It used to be perennial. People said it used to flow year-round until the 1950s. It's diversions. These diversions begin at Hidden Villa. But if you walk the creek, as I have many times, you'll see diversions all up and down the creek. People are pulling it up to water their grass. The other thing we've done is we've turned the creek into a very dangerous thing in the winter. When it rains, you wouldn't want any child to get anywhere near it because it's going 40 miles an hour and it's a muddy storm drain, basically. Every storm drain should be converted into a bioswale. If I was going to say 2 things to do to restore our creeks, these would be the 2. Start converting every storm drain. Every time you have to fix a storm drain, make it a bioswale. Basically, take a huge hole, built with a lot of gravel, let the water just go into the ground. This will raise the water table. And in our dry summer, that high water table will nourish the creek and keep it flowing. Next slide, please. So,
Can I ask
yes,
a question on that? And first of all, I probably go down to Redwood Grove 5 times a week with my family. I love the Adobe Creek that passes through there. It's just such a special place in Los Altos. It spends a lot of time dry over the summer, probably for the reasons you mentioned. My gut reaction to what you suggested was, even if you were to kind of do what you're suggesting, do we have enough rainwater in the summer now? Like what do we know about how decreasing rainwater over the summer with climate change means for water flow.
It's interesting. We're getting hotter, drier weather, but with a warmer atmosphere, we actually get more rainfall when we get a storm.
Mhm.
I don't know how it's going to net out though. Fewer storms, but more water dumping out because there's, in a warmer atmosphere, there's more water in the atmosphere to come down. But at least we would have a creek that's not racing and a danger to our children if we got rid of all these storm drains. We would have clear water as opposed to this muddy thing that I see every day out from my backyard. Right now, it's dangerous to go down there, and it's. But in 3 or 4 days after the storm, it will be just a beautiful bubbling brook, and I think that's what Shallop and Bickle is what people enjoy here. The diversions are a big problem. I think probably a lot of the diversions were for agriculture, for the apricot orchards, but now it's just for people's lawns, which feeds, I think, into this why native trees, shrubs, and plants. If you haven't read Professor Tallamy's books, I'll talk about his 2007 book in a second, but he published this paper. It turned out every plant, no, they don't know, but or they're vulnerable to being consumed by insects. So they secrete all kinds of chemotoxins. Certain bugs adapt and can tolerate that chemotoxin. Basically, the caterpillar then, that plant, like a milkweed, which is toxic to a lot of insects, monarch butterfly larvae can feed on it, and they tolerate the toxin. They actually benefit from the toxin because birds taste them. They taste terrible because they're filled with milkweed toxin. Tallamy said, well, what if we took Luna moth larvae, and in the top you see a list of non-native plants from Ailanthus, tree of heaven, which we have all over, and which will become, if you're going to eradicate one tree, non-native tree in Los Altos, it would be Ailanthus because it's the host plant for the native lanternfly, the non-native lanternfly, which will be terrible when it gets here. But all those non-natives, Paulownia, Oriental bittersweet, blah, 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 the larvae couldn't eat that. They couldn't eat it. Only when they could. The one non-native was Horiolism, that little white flower, very fragrant. But the native sweet gum tree is its native host plant. It's an eastern U.S. species. Big, beautiful moth. But he showed very elegantly that they couldn't even, these native insects can't survive. So the next slide, please. So we buy, so on average, a plant supports about 10, one species of plant supports about 10 native insects. Some support many insects, some a few. The average is roughly 10. And this is a milkweed. And if you look carefully at this drawing, which is created with ChatGPT, you see not just monarchs, but some bees and some beetles and other kind of flies and other interesting insects whose larvae feed on the milkweed. But if you get a row of a couple dozen of milkweeds, you will get monarchs, and the male will just fly back and forth all day long on a sunny day, waiting for a female to show up so that they can mate. It's just incredible. But you need to get masses of them to really get that effect. Next slide, please. By buying plants at nurseries, many of these plants from Europe or Asia or Africa, they're marketed as pest-free. Well, they're pest-free because our native insects can't tolerate the chemotoxins of these non-native plants. Nevertheless, we've imported all these non-native plants, and they have brought with them their parasites, which have wiped out forest after forest after forest. The American chestnut, the American elm are perhaps the biggest stories, but there's many. Fraser fir, and in bold, some of our native species. The oaks, of course, with southern oak gut maybe being, and then the stories get complex. The sugar pine, ponderosa pine, western white pine, white bark pine in California in the bottom row, they get this non-native fungus, white pine blister rust, which makes them then vulnerable to our native insect that preys on them, the mountain pine beetle. So some of these stories get a little bit involve a fungus and an insect. Sometimes it's a non-native fungus and a native insect, sometimes the other way. But we destroyed whole forests this way. In 1776, the De Anza expedition came through. They were coming down from the Presidio in San Francisco looking to establish Santa Clara mission, trying to find a good site. They thought El Palo Alto would be a great site, and then discovered San Francisco Creek dries up in the lower reaches in the summer, although it too is perennial, basically from Unipero Cerro up to all the way up. But Father Pedro Font said this is the Llanos de los Robles, the plain of the oaks. He described this area as a grassland, an oak savanna. Grasslands dotted with huge, majestic valley oaks. You could ride a horse without bumping your head through these gigantic oaks, which were once valley oaks. That's what used to be here. Next slide, please. So this is, I'm going to draw on a paper. It's actually a paper in the United Kingdom, but talks. It's just a nice short 2 or 3 page summary of the benefits of urban trees and action steps we might take. I put for primary benefits of all the different benefits he listed. I think these are the 3 primary: carbon sequestration, and of course, the bigger the tree, the more carbon. If you think about a tree, it's like a cylinder. If you double the height of the tree, the volume of it only doubles. But if you double its width, if you double its radius, you square the volume. So really large trees, they ought to get old and big and have great girth matters, not just height. A 250 acre green space can cool the surrounding 400 meters of a built up area by 7 degrees. Now it's hard in the city to find 250 acre green spaces where we've developed and now we have all this pressure to build more houses, but it can make a big difference in a world that home noted, which is going to get warmer in all likelihood. Air purification also seems to be dependent on large trees, and Tanya, if you'll click again, and the numerous secondary benefits of these urban trees. The biodiversity, supporting wildlife. Valley oak supports like 30 different butterflies and mammals. Just the biophilia, the appeal to people feel better. They're actually healthier. There's less depression when there's lots of trees. A lot of the stuff in published peer-reviewed literature. For noise reduction, this is of course United Kingdom. They talk about using conifers. I don't think that fits here as well, but we'll talk about that. And they also, the roots in these trees, even in the sidewalks in the city, improve water infiltration. They decrease runoff going down the streets. They make the soil more porous. So they recommended this tree action plan. First of all, do you know how many of your acres are covered by trees in your town? That is, assess the percentage of canopy coverage. You should plan to try to achieve 30% of your city shaded. Plan for larger green spaces if you can, because the larger the green space area, the greater the cooling. Large trees really matter. 10% of your tree should have trunk diameters 24 inches or more at breast height, 4.5 feet up. Of course, you want tree diversity. If we planted all coast live oaks and we got hit by sods, we'd lose all of our coast live oaks. So diversity is really important. Don't plant more than 10% of any one species. Instead of conifers for noise pollution, we have evergreen trees, of course, because we're in a more temperate, a warmer temperate climate than the United Kingdom. And things like Tolian and Pacific waxfir will be great choices that don't get too big. And then of course, there's people that are more expert than me, like Grassroots Ecology, that provide great guidance.
What do you know about the California bay laurel that commonly grows in the creek and used to be?
They regularly sprout in my yard because I'm so close to the creek. And I pull them up because they carry Psychoptera, they carry solids. And I have a gigantic coast live oak that I don't want them to. So they are wonderful. They are edible. The leaves are, and so are the fruits. But they need to be a ways, I think, away from the vulnerable oaks.
So I'm wondering what came first. They're both native. Is there a certain area that we have the California bay laurels and then native, and then the live oaks, and then we have intermix?
I think that they are also a little more riparian
Mhm.
than the oaks,
Mhm.
although the canyon live oak's riparian and it's vulnerable to sods, so there's exceptions. I also added this 8th point, which was not in the United Kingdom thing, but I just got lemonade berries. These are native to Southern California, but if we're gonna have a warmer, dry climate, at least they're native. If they had to get here by birds dropping their berries and moving the seeds north, you know, it would take hundreds of years to get here, but I planted a lemonade berry 2 years ago. I watered it once. It's gotten no water since, and it's a beautiful evergreen. It gives me good fruit. Engelmann oak would be an oak. It doesn't get too big. It's evergreen. It's also sods resistant. It's a Southern California species. So just a thought about this. Of course, many people have written about assisted migration of trees and plants with climate change. But I think something to incorporate in your thinking. Next slide, please. I built this slide, which is hard to read, but hopefully a useful reference tool. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows down. Are they sods resistant or not? And on the left, you see the red oaks and the golden oaks are not sods resistant, but the white oaks, valley oaks, blue oaks, scrub oaks are. Scrub oak, Quercus variegafolia, grows less than 20 feet. This might be a great evergreen selection. You get acorns everywhere, but other than that, it doesn't get too big. It's evergreen, it's sods resistant. Not one of those big trees you want to get, like valley oak, which are also sods resistant, live really long, 600 years, and get over 100 feet. But if you have the space, you use your valley oaks for carbon sequestration. If you don't have space, you might use scrub oaks. Blue oaks, I talked about fire resistance, something pretty important in our area. And the Engelmann oak in Southern Cal actually probably is the most fire resistant from what I could find in the literature. Coast live oak, pretty good. Blue oak, also pretty good. Next slide.
So can I ask, the fire resistance, how did you assess that?
Fire resistant
Yours
from the literature.
from literature? So where you got no star, does that mean you couldn't find any?
Couldn't find anything, correct. Yeah. You don't have the new slide there? I just emailed you. That's okay. I just was, I made this afternoon, if there was time, 2 slides you could use CalScape to, what butterflies does my plant support? And you could go the other way. You say, I want this butterfly, California sister. What's its host plant? So there's a free, and they give you 2 confirmed host plants and then likely host plants. So I just bought a Canyon live oak from Grassroots Ecology Nursery today because I want to see if I can get lure some California sisters to my yard. There's willows. We don't plant much. Willows are, if you want butterflies, Western tiger swallowtails, mourning cloaks. It's a long list. Polyphemus moss. This gigantic, beautiful butterflies. There's nothing like willow to do it. We have some miniature willows. Salix, Melanocarpus, I think I just looked up. Sandbar willow is the one I put in this other slide, but it gets about 16 feet. But we have a couple others that get no more than 6 feet tall that are native and that might be more suitable for your urban planning and recommendations to the people upstairs or downstairs or what's in there. But anyway, that's what I had to say. Thanks so much for listening. And are there any other questions or?
You have various questions, but thank you for the presentation.
Oh, yeah. Do we clarify
It
questions?
sounds like there's gonna be a discussion.
Yeah,
Or like a
yeah.
long-
Public comment?
How do you explain the perennial section of Adobe Creek?
The perennial section,
I've always thought maybe people overwatering their lawn and it gets back into the creek.
there's rock, so subterranean rock that comes close to the surface. So as you turn at, Old Keys.
Yeah.
If, where the culvert is created, a scour pool and waterfalls out of it. But from there, all through the Jesuit, through the farm community and down to, it ends literally at Nemesis Bridge.
It does. I've seen egrets in there.
And then it goes subterranean. And years ago, someone put dye in and to try to figure out where the creek goes.
Okay.
Because where I live, it comes back, but it's just a trickle. Redwood Grove can be dry as well, and I can have a little trickle, down, by, Santa Rita. Almost El Camino. And, I don't know where it goes, but our friends with this giant redwood, I think it's going underground through our town. Some of our streets, you'll drive down the street and you'll see the street gradually goes down and comes. I think Adobe Creek used to move all over the place. So they're Permanente Creek and Hill Creek. And right now, their current course is probably a relatively recent thing. But the redwoods are dying in Redwood Grove because the water tables, they hit 120, 130 feet and there's not enough water. But if those redwood trees were above Manresa Bridge, I believe they would go to 200. It's just the wrong place. It used to be all willows, actually.
What do you think of eucalyptus tree? Should we take it out from our city?
Yeah.
Since they are
Just rough process. Are there any clarifying questions to the presentation or should we move into discussion?
Discussion would include questions.
It would
So,
include questions. And then also time check.
Yeah.
So maybe till 6:45? Is that okay? Yeah. And I'm sure we have access to you for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just asking about eucalyptus.
Yeah, so eucalyptus trees are actually adapted to promote fire. They have more resin, highly flammable resin. Their bark strips off and sheds. It literally creates fuel. Because then they are capable of epicormic sprouting, that is, after a fire, there's buds deep within, they will come back and nothing else will. Airman's native, maybe a little bit similar, but at least it's native and a whole pyramid of insects. But bees can get nectar from a lot of non-native flowers, including eucalyptus, but it's not a host plant for our native insects.
Right.
So I wouldn't kill a tree unless it was close to a structure and might, fall on it. The eucalyptus branches, I've killed people in Los Altos, but because we need the carbon to be sequestered until we had offset it significantly with other trees, valley oaks in the town, redwoods in the hills. So I think certainly don't think they should be planted.
But for the existing one or the one that doesn't look healthy and
Yeah.
there are a lot more fire hazard than
Absolutely.
than
You see a
the
sprout?
carbon sequestration. I think about a year ago, there was a huge one, fall down near Loyola Corner, very early in the morning. No one get hurt, fortunately, but I think some of those trees, they were leaning towards the road and it does, I think it's a hazard.
Well, someone on tape on our bike got killed by a eucalyptus branch fell on and killed him.
No,
But so when I hike the creek, if I see a young eucalyptus, I pull it out. I'm not going to give up that much carbon. But the big old ones,
yeah, it takes like 40 years, right? Or
Yeah.
even longer.
fun fact about redwoods, we had the CZU fire in Big Basin in 2020.
Right.
If the tree was more than 1.5 feet thick, they've all come back. They call them fuzz sticks, like eucalyptus, they have epicormic sprouting. So all the branches burned off, all the needles gone. They just had these black telephone pole like redwoods, and now they're covered in green. And they call them fuzz sticks. So the first 50 years of redwood can get killed by fire, but even in a high intensity mega fire, redwood is fire resistant when it gets old enough. Unfortunately, I'm not recommending redwoods except along the creeks, you could plant redwoods. Right, El Palo Alto is the shining example that they can do well in lower elevations if there's water nearby. Although the top third of El Palo Alto has died because the creek keeps incising and it's now it's got, riprap and stuff, it's incising and eroding lower and lower. Now the water table is so low that the top third of El Palo Alto has died. So you'll see there's an irrigation pipe that goes up the side of it to the top and a little sprinkler on the side. But you could plant redwoods in the riparian zones. Just redwood growth just happened to be not great for 100 years, but not great probably after. But above there, yeah, should work fine.
So in terms of ecosystem restoration, I'm curious where you think of as being the focus at a city level. Are the riparian corridors what you consider the focus, or is there benefit to trying to focus on where like Rancho San Antonio has a lot of native habitat, depending on what your opinion is, but that could source some of those species? What do you think about that balance?
I haven't talked about wildlife linkages and corridors. If Bill Lycum was here, the gray fox guy who's been studying the gray fox in the Baylands, these species that are trapped in the Baylands, foxes, coyotes, all manner of smaller critters, they also can't use these concrete channels because they're too exposed. So they don't like, the only natural channel left from the uplands to the Baylands is San Francisco Creek, because it's the county border, and San Mateo County and Santa Clara County couldn't agree on who would pay for all the cement. So that remains the one county connection from the bay to the hills. That's something that should be protected. I don't know what to do with our creeks because they're Adobe is concrete channel from El Camino to the bay, and Permanente is diverted to Stevens Creek at El Camino Hospital. The old Permanente goes into a pipe right by St. Francis and is underground until it comes up at Google by the bay. Yes, actually, now that you made me think about it. If you wanted a big win, you would change the Permanente Creek diversion channel, which is in Los Altos and Sunnyvale before it reaches Stevens Creek at Sunnyvale. But if you could get the water to remove the concrete flat bottom, then Steelhead, which they've done a great job with Stevens Creek, they just haven't. If they could fix that, then they could be connected to Permanente Creek. I mentioned that Steelhead, when they're landlocked, take the form of rainbow trout. There are rainbow trout up by the quarry on Permanente Creek. They are the most genetically inbred of all the steelhead in the whole Bay Area. But if you could connect it, you'd have steelhead runs coming up, and they would replenish the genetics. The people would love it. Rancho San Antonio is the most used park. If there was one thing on the creek I would do, that would be it. The whole Foothill College parking lot probably should be a freshwater marsh. Parking lot. They'd have to build a big parking structure, but they just blocked the creek. It also is buried there. I've talked to Kit Gordon about daylighting creeks. We don't really. Permanente Creek would be too big of a project.
Could you explain daylighting? I'm not familiar with the term.
Sorry?
I'm not familiar with the term.
Oh, daylighting. There's all these creeks that are buried in pipes, like Permanente is from basically from St. Francis High School to the bay. It's underground in a pipe. So nothing can come up or down it. It's no longer a linkage for land mammals or fish or amphibians. I would think about the city should offer to buy insurance coverage for the Jesuits, so you could extend the trail. Along the creek, it's perennial there, it's badly incised. But that whole section from Manresa Bridge to O'Keefe could be restored. And then there's a little park just before 280. You can walk under 280 where the creek goes under, that's how the deer get through. I believe, I've seen deer walking through there, but, I think carbon sequestration's more important than anything else. So I think what Gary's been doing, planting trees is the most important of all the conservation things. Because if this place turns into the Mojave Desert, which it's going to, then any other conservation effort doesn't matter.
So related to that, if people have native oaks and the acorns are ending up on the street, what should we be advising them to do with those? In your estimation?
Yeah, so you have to right size the oak for your property.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, it's a messy, but
You can give them to my daughter. She loves collecting them.
I'm blanking on the name of the guy, the arborist who helped Apple with all of their headquarters. But he was the one who he actually tries the acorns of different oaks, and some of them are sweet and edible. It varies from one individual to the next. I don't know if there was anything you could. Was there really no way we could use all those acorns, which were used for food by the indigenous people? Is there? The protein rich should have some value. I don't really know. I'm not rated enough, but I wonder if this would be some use. But you would pick the smaller oaks. So that graphic, which I'm happy to share the slides with anyone who wants. But I built that graphic with somebody at the UC Santa Cruz, our breeding for our different native oaks, and you get solids fire resistance, sods resistance, longevity, and I think the important factors. But yeah, people are planting, or they inherited a valley oak sometimes in a small suburban yard, and it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much, you guys.
And
Great
I'm
to
sure
meet you.
we'll be
Thanks for all you do.
finding different, being asked at different times for advice and guidance. So thank you so
I
much.
can help in any way I can. The Resource Conservation District for our county, which I was the president of the board for a while, I served for 10 years. Now I'm just an associate director. They sponsored this redwood study we're about to publish, but the RCD's mission is to conserve soil, water, and wildlife. It has some monies that they provide grants for. Years ago, I talked to Hidden Villa about, there was just different leadership then. Storing floodwaters and using that to irrigate their farms instead of diverting water from the perennial stream and making it not perennial. Those are the size projects that the RCD could help with. I don't know what's happening with government funding these days, but there used to be a lot of government funding for a lot of these. Thanks again. Great to meet you.
Right. Next up, we have EV Fair update.
Yeah. So about that. Basically, the Eventbrite is up for the event. So you can register, get it on your calendar today. Living Electric Fair is the name of the new event. I think I might have stated that at one point. Answer is great. I can tell you that there's going to be 4 zones. One called Electric Avenue, which is going to be home electrification / EVs. Zero waste zone. A micro mobility zone, so that's e-scooters and e-bikes. Final zone, which I'm blanking on briefly. The family discovery zone. So contracted someone who makes climate-based games will actually help teach people. So that's why the event is largely being billed as a family fun event, because it's really meant for all ages. So those are some of the highlights. More exhibitors to come on the list, but yeah, very excited for what's in store.
Sounds really good.
Yeah, you said it's online. I didn't catch where it's online.
Oh, so it's on Eventbrite.
Eventbrite, okay.
The website's still coming, but it'll be posted on Greentown Los Altos.
Got it.
Yeah, and I don't have the exact description in memorized in terms of where it's going to be, but it is primarily an outdoor event in front of State Street Market. So that's the exciting part is we're downtown this year, and May 4th, easy to remember because of the Star Wars. May the 4th be with you, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. So I'm sure I'll say that a couple more times before the event happens, but it doesn't hurt to say it.
Are you going to be like,
Is that?
I think-
The clarifying questions are just simple.
not clarifying questions?
Okay. Any public comments? All right, now we can have discussion.
So are you gonna have a, that I think you're working on the incentive for electrification, all that. Are you gonna have a booth to help community resident know if they want to electrify, say, get a heat pump or a heater or HVAC and all that stuff?
So there will
I know
be-
that we're still probably exploring, but maybe we can give people like information right there. In addition to.
So SBCE will be there with,
Oh,
I believe they're calling it Dream Energy Home. Again, I might have the name wrong, but so that should showcase the whole suite of you would hope home electrification to be. I do think there is a standing invitation for us, but I could still check on that and make sure we could. But I'm confident that we'll have the suite of exhibitors that you would be able to get those resources from the event.
I've been in the dream home. It's very impressive. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it. It really brings life to the concept and gets you comfortable. You're like, oh, it kind of looks like a regular boiler. So nothing to be afraid of. So if there were any way of getting that to be part of the exhibition, that would be awesome.
It is. It's coming to you.
And will SBC be there to promote their electrification?
The full service
Yeah.
home upgrade program.
I'll have to check on that. But
We did speak with them about the
So maybe
readiness
we
to do
can-
that, and they hope.
we
that
can
could-
send whoever the contact was
Yeah.
to Tanya,
Yes.
and then Tanya can share it with.
about it.
I think I love that it's bringing the children in. That's where you start.
right.
And
Oh,
you have to
and
get them.
if you go to the event page, you'll see there's a mascot of sorts for this event called Sparky. So that's another piece of it. So yeah.
I hope Smokey doesn't have a problem with parking. All right, next item, are we done with this one? You, Carl? Next item, the 2025 work plan.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of things in this item, so
Yes.
we should probably keep it efficient. I can list those out. Debriefing on the meeting with the council liaison and the letter. And then there's a report out by the working pair for electrification. And then if we need to form subcommittees is what I have.
Yeah, so Carl and I and Tanya had a meeting with Vice Chair Fleetwood. And we got a little bit of guidance on what we can do and how to go about it. And first thing I asked is, how do we know if our work plan is approved? So anyways, that's part of the meeting is to say if the plan is approved or not, but then it's doing that. And so she said that there wasn't any red flag, nobody pointed out anything that they didn't want in the work plan, so we can proceed as if it's approved, but we're gonna write a memo to council asking specifically for that approval. And in that memo, we also have a few things that we want to mention, that specifically the priority of items we will work on, the budget requests that we have. I'm trying to think. Yeah, and then clarification on things that, you know, are technically, you know, that don't appear to be our, the environmental commission's, responsibility, like the transportation. But to clarify that our role is to connect and maybe advise, but not drive any policy, there. So, Carl and I are gonna draft that memo, send it to Tanya, and she will share it with the council. And Nisawa has agreed to review the memo. What we need to do as a commission is to approve the key points that will go in the memo. And so that's kind of the debrief. And then we have, we requested some clarification on how the subcommittees and working pairs and individual research happens. And then we're still unclear on whether commissioners are locked into a subcommittee once they get on it. So that's, Vice Chair Figure proposed that you will have a meeting with Gabe, to which one of those of us will be invited to get clarification on some of those things. And is there something else that we were going to discuss with Gabe? With Lisa? Yeah, so basically more clarity on procedures and process and how we
And I
work.
think the feedback.
Yeah. And yes, and then the feedback that we talked about based on last year's experience and some of the things that Tom had brought up at the joint meeting. She recommended not to send that to council, but to discuss with her and Gabe potentially, so that we can resolve that, and then we'll go from there. That's one of the key roles of the liaison, is what she said, is to resolve any conflict or issues and support that. That's what I have in. I'll be able to talk about what will go into the memo. We on it.
Yeah, so let's just continue doing our report outs and then we'll move into discussion.
Yeah, so that's just something we need to do when we get to that point.
Okay.
And then the second thing was the feedback you got on how liaisons, working pairs, independent researchers, and ad hoc subcommittees can work together or not. What are the rules for that?
So, just to summarize is that commissioners can be on an ad hoc subcommittee. They can be a liaison to other commissions, and they can be doing working pairs, and they can be doing individual research. I think
All at the same time,
yes, as long as
yes.
they are not connected. The question you particularly asked was, can someone who's a liaison, can a commissioner who is a liaison report out to their liaison commission about something they're not working on? And the answer is yes, if that information was brought to the entire body at a public meeting. So it can't be from a discussion that was had, because they aren't supposed to be having any discussions outside of what's going on at these meetings. So the answer is yes, if it's brought to a public meeting.
So if we're taking something we've discussed here, and sharing it with whoever we're a liaison to, that's okay, but not something that we're on a subcommittee on that we haven't discussed at the public meeting, right? There's some other questions. One was definitely answered that commissioners should not be sending direct emails to the chair. All emails and communication should go to Tanya. Only to Tanya, and then Tanya will share to whoever is required. There was a couple other questions that I had. Can the same commissioner be a liaison to multiple commissions, other commissions?
Yes.
And then is there a limit on the number of working pairs that can form to look at different topics?
There's no limit, but they can't overlap in any way.
Mathematical.
Yes, exactly. There is a
I was thinking about the same
mathematical
thing in my
limit
head.
Well, they can't overlap in how?
in any way. If there's a gray area,
Yeah, so
You
okay, so
shouldn't.
if,
we don't wanna, I don't wanna put you all in a situation where we're
Yeah.
violating. So we wanna be very careful and
Right,
not
right,
ruin
yeah.
it for also everyone. else
yeah,
too.
yeah. So if, say Carl and I are working on specific restoration idea, working here, researching that. And then say Shopping and I are working on transportation as a working pair. That's okay for me to be on those two, so long as they're different things, and I'm not talking about this with that and that with this.
My understanding, yes,
Okay.
it doesn't violate the Brown Act.
Okay. All right, so I think that, does that, well, that's our download in terms of the questions. And then the other question was whether we needed different subcommittees for the different sections of, say, the energy goal. One is the ordinance and one is the incentive program, and the answer is yes. We can't have one subcommittee on a very broad goal. So it has to be more specific to each goal, right?
Yes.
So that's all.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear that. Could you repeat that?
So, we need to have separate ad hoc subcommittees for each goal within a category, so we can't have one subcommittee working on all energy projects. We would need to have separate ones, say, working on the ordinance, and a separate one working on the incentives. Or it could be, two working pairs, or however we do it, but it needs to be separate. On the two different things.
Well, and what distinguishes or what determines, I guess at the top level, when I look at the energy category, those two objectives or two working items are very similar and actually overlap at the end of the day. And so to me, again, I don't know the rules, but exactly, but that lends itself to one subcommittee working on those two items. It would make things very efficient, and actually those things are anyway. So I guess I don't know how we distinguish between what's a singular subcommittee and what is needs two.
Maybe when we finish whatever download we have, we can do the discussion on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's something else, Tanya, on your list?
For what we're looking at reporting out on. Yeah, so the report out by the working pair, Tom and Dawn. And then if we want any other working pair or individual research report outs that need to form a subcommittee.
Tom, you want to go first?
Yeah, let me just pull up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, do you want me to go?
I can share
I'm
the,
just gonna share the slide.
Yeah, so do you want me to just summarize what Dawn and I talked about?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. And I think you have a slide there, Tanya, that we sent in. You can pull it up. But I can keep this pretty brief, and I kind of foreshadowed a little bit of it with my question, Rashina. So when we looked at the two topics under energy, it seemed to us, as I said, that there was a lot of overlap between those two points in the working plan. And so we came up with a goal, a top line goal that we thought would cover both those. And I think you can see it there. It's to develop recommendations to support and accelerate building electrification through policy incentives, engagement, and with the cap. And then we have 4 sub bullets that would feed into that. Look at research and propose electrification ordinances and guidelines for new construction and remodels, evaluating all the options on the table, including reach codes, NOx, and building incentives, not excluding anything at this point. The same on incentives, identify and recommend city-sponsored and third-party incentives that encourage the electrification of new and existing homes, both monetary and non-monetary. One point I'd like to make is there are a lot of non-city based incentives out there, I think, that we could leverage with both SVCE and then, of course, BACMD coming up. And so we need to leverage those instead of coming up with our own ideas to the extent we can. And then finally, the 2 final bullets would be, as always, community engagement. Make sure the community understands the benefits and the available incentives. And finally, obviously, we're going to work through this or work through the cap with staff and partners to ensure everybody understands this as well. But our feeling is looking at those 2 points in the work plan under energy, it makes sense for there to be one subcommittee. Although again, I'm not aware of the finer points of the rules, so happy to discuss that.
Are there any other working groups or individual?
I just have a quick report out on the research I've been doing on deconstruction. So I've been talking to this group it's a nonprofit called the Reuse People. They are headquartered in Oakland, but I think now they're nationwide, and they're working with They work with Palo Alto on their deconstruction ordinance, which came out in 2022, and they've connected me with a point person there to talk about their experience, and they're also working on. They've done some ordinances already, and they're working on others, say Fort Worth, Texas, Boulder, Colorado, and Berkeley, so kind of all across the country. The founder has a nice guidelines for setting up a deconstruction ordinance. So I'm in contact with him as well, and we'll work with him to get outlines and then bring it back. So when we get to future agenda items about those, I'd like to in that front. So that's fine. They just
So no
talking to-
subcommittee?
I don't think it needs a subcommittee. It's just gathering information. If we get to a point where we're drafting an ordinance and it feels like a big lift, then we can do that. This is just. Anything else? I haven't done anything with the liaison, but I'm just going to be liaison to the planning commission because I just wanted guidance on how we can do different things. So I'll plan on reaching out to the commission and see how we can work.
Does yours need a subcommittee, or if not, I can just wait till the commissioners' reports and comments update section?
So we should talk about subcommittees that may need to form
Okay.
when we get to the discussion part, because we have to discuss it.
Yes. Okay, but I think you're a bit late, right?
I think it can. I mean, I do feel that what I'm doing ultimately belongs in a subcommittee. And I'm, without commenting on it, I'm sympathetic to some of the points that were made earlier.
Okay, so do you want to report out right now? Or did you
Whatever's
want to?
more appropriate, I can do, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
let's just do that since. Do you want me to share what you said?
I mean, you can just share the maybe slide 3, because then I can.
Pull it up.
Yes, so I kind of start talking. Yeah. I kind of went a little bit back to basics here. Bearing in mind I'm a party of one now. And really broke down different areas that I think are needed. You need to address when you're talking about incentives. And so the one is, the research points pretty clearly to the fact that turnkey programs are highly effective. They've got many different names, like in Europe, they're called one-stop shops. What I'm actually referring to, though, as a specific example, is the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Program, the full service home upgrade program that we've been talking about. A lot of feedback from other cities was that rebates alone are insufficient, and so this is definitely a great way to drive it. Obviously, the financial incentives have been evolving over time, and some of these are in an area of uncertainty at the moment, bearing in mind the new federal administration. The third area that's really interesting is permitting, mainly because there's 2 jurisdictions in particular, San Francisco and what's the name of the other city? I think it's Redwood, which is kind of a more comparable, I think, with Los Altos, that have done some interesting things there to speed up the process of getting permits that I think offer some good guidance. And then was also doing a bit of research around other, non-environmental benefits to electrification that sometimes fly a little bit under the radar, like health. Then another angle that I was looking at, this is based on literature research, is that a lot of low, medium income households actually have bigger problems with having non-electrified homes. And then the final piece is that, contractor readiness is, according to the data, not really there. So a lot of contractors lack heat pump expertise. And so I am working towards formulating a list of recommendations based on the research. There's still a few things that I need to fact check, so I'm not really ready to share that yet. But I would hope that, depending on what we discuss, how to take it forward in this group, I would be able to share this at the next meeting. And then I think it's probably good that, because this is quite a complex topic ultimately. So I feel like it, the work here is meaningful and needs to be prioritized together with city staff and also with the council.
So are you suggesting a separate subcommittee from the other electrification subcommittee?
Actually, I'm kind of sympathetic to Commissioner Heck's point, that I do think it would be more effective if if code and incentives were kind of in the same group, of course, subject to what's appropriate and what the rules are. Just think it from the perspective of making effective decisions. I do believe that to be true.
So any clarifying questions? Okay. Public comment? So I think now we can discuss.
We have a very small update on forestry ecosystem working fair as it is. What?
Sorry, I didn't do another report out.
Not very long. We met with someone that we met with previously on the old urban forest subcommittee about mapping tools, and then they provided with us a free tool that helps us assess the canopy change in Los Altos. So we certainly hope to have a more robust analysis of that at a future meeting, along with building off of what we've heard tonight.
Yeah, and it would be nice, Tanya, if we know the tree database, what have been collected. I think 2 years ago when we were talking about urban forest plan, I think you usually have an annual compilation of the data, right?
Yeah, annual, no, but you can reach out to me directly if you want
Okay.
to discuss that
Okay,
more.
yeah, I think we would like to get some idea about how you're tracking. I think those are like city-owned trees, right? At least you have your database is tracking all the city-owned trees. And so we can
Imagine.
understand the
Okay.
change.
Yeah, connect with planning on that.
Yeah. If we can get a report.
Who manages that?
Okay. So just as a process kind of thing before we jump in the future, for how we'll do this with all the working pair individual research and subcommittee updates, those are all going to be done during the commissioner reports and comments. I believe you used to do that in the past so it'll be like a roundtable and everyone can provide their updates via that roundtable. And there will be no discussion. There can be simple clarifying questions, but each of the commissioners need to let the commission know during that time that you plan to bring that back at a future meeting in like April and there needs to be some kind of like date committed to that. That is how it was explained to me that it needs to go, and that's how it goes with other commissions. So that's what we will do going forward so that everyone can be in agreement on and aware of when those things are going to come back. So I just want to put that out there since we were kind of talking about processes and stuff. And the work plan wouldn't necessarily be coming back like this every meeting. Yeah, so in terms of processes, does everyone understand that or have any clarifying questions? Yes.
Make sure I got it right. You're saying to have it as just an informational item, that aspect is done, that everything is a discussion room for. That's my impression, but is that?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Is it? Yeah, in what situation would we be sharing an update where it isn't a discussion?
Isn't?
Yeah.
Any time during the commissioner's reports and comments. So we get to the commissioner's reports and comments section of the agenda, everyone can give an update. And then say, we want to bring this back in April with a substantial discussion. And I think normally it's not just a discussion, usually it's like action. So we want to do an action, we want to form a subcommittee at the next meeting.
Right.
That's how it needs to be done going forward. Does that make sense?
So my understanding of what you just said is, if we're bringing it back to the next meeting, it's going to be brought back because we have some purpose behind it. We want to have a discussion.
Yeah.
We wouldn't ever say, I want to be able to share a little update at the end. Or would we have that option too? As in like.
No, you can share your updates. Yeah, you can share any updates, but we just can't have discussion.
Right.
So like you just did right now, you could do that in the commissioner's reports and comments section.
Right.
So it could be like a round table.
But you want us to preempt, like, if we wanted to do that sort of short update at the next meeting, we have to say during this meeting, we want to share that.
No,
you wouldn't have to do that.
No,
Okay.
you don't have to do that. You only have to tell us if you have something substantial to bring
Right.
back to put on the different part of the agenda.
Yeah.
to agendize.
Let me also clarify, that my understanding is that if you want to have a discussion on something that you want to share.
Yeah.
Then that needs to be agendized.
Yeah.
Right. If there's something
You
that
need to let
needs a
us know
discussion.
at this meeting.
Yeah.
So this, at least.
Or
a days
the
ahead.
meeting prior.
Yeah.
So it can be agendized. So you can just give an update and not have anything else. Like you don't have to say, we want to bring it back. That's fine if you don't.
Yeah.
know for you to bring it back, but we can't bring it back until you let us know in a previous meeting. If that makes
Yes.
sense. And it's a little
Could we,
it's hard to wrap your head around.
could we in theory say, like for me, I have an intention to be ready to present. So could I let you know before you prepare the agenda that I indeed want it to be agendized, or does it need to be discussed and agreed in the meeting?
It needs to be, you need to let us know in the meeting what
Got it.
are you, is it just gonna be a discussion just to discuss, or do you have a
So we
specific?
need to approve
Do
the
you want the
agenda.
commission to approve your recommendations, or do you want, and then, so. If it sounds like you want to, if it looks like you are gonna be presenting and have an ask, then you should probably mention it
Yeah,
today or next month or
During the
something.
potential future agenda items.
right. Makes sense.
Or during the commissioner's report and updates, you can say, I plan to bring this
Okay.
back to the commission in April.
Okay, so that doesn't need other people to, that doesn't need a vote on it.
We can vote at the end,
Okay.
but it's just letting us know. I don't think it needs a vote unless it's something that the commission doesn't know what they're working on or something like that. So yeah, that's just kind of process wise. If you let me know after, we're not gonna be able to agendize it.
Yeah.
Until another meeting.
It's a few months.
Yeah, Tanya, just so I understand, I think historically, we have kind of told you, maybe not in the meeting, but maybe after the meeting, but before the following meeting or the next meeting, hey, we're gonna agendize this. But now what you're saying is we just have to make sure we bring that up at a meeting and let everybody know it's gonna be brought up at a future meeting in order to get officially agendized for action. Does that make sense?
We've done that for things we've voted on or subcommittees that we already had. But
Yeah.
going forward with all these individual research and working pairs and, that should be the process. And there should be something that the working pair or the individual researcher or the subcommittee wants the commission to act on or get specific information from them on. Like we're doing with the subcommittees right now. Okay, so that was just processing.
Yeah.
Are
we done with the?
So if you want to discuss, yeah.
So, several things to ask each other questions and discuss about, but also maybe to add to before we get into that. Pull up the work plan, maybe the version I sent you a link to just add it in the names of the people.
I think it's gonna be kind of hard to read.
Yeah, this one. Yeah, we probably don't need to go into the notes. Well, we could. If it's hard to read, then we'll skip that out. Hopefully it won't take too long on it. All right, so what we've done last time, we kind of set up in the assignment part, I just listed what we agreed on last time. And we weren't sure if what we'd hoped for when we were doing the work plan is to have one ad hoc subcommittee working on promote, electrification, whether it was incentive or ordinance. And we have to probably clarify. I personally, let's go to discussion yet. So we should have a chat about what we want to do with this in terms of whether we want to continue as working pair and individual researcher, or we want to propose to form a subcommittee or two subcommittees, or one subcommittee and a working pair, whichever. We should have that discussion on. In the green community, I think we have a working pair, and if we wanted that to become a subcommittee, or I don't know if you want to wait till we have clarification on whether people can go in and out, or having the seventh commissioner join, we could continue as a, you guys could continue as a working pair, so that's another discussion to have. With transportation, we're just liaisons, we don't have and we're not working unless somebody feels that we should be working on the EV charging master plan urgently. I think we plan to have that a little bit later. We talked about putting that later last time. Resource conservation, so I think I'm okay to just do individual research for now, and if it comes to a point where we need more, more resources on it, I will ask for that or propose it. And I think, is there anything else at the bottom? Yeah, so these, we should probably chat briefly about how we want to go about the rest of this stuff. We talked last time about each commissioner taking in the update cap, each commissioner reviewing one section or working pairs reviewing a couple sections together. And we can touch briefly about that. We don't have to decide this time. I think we have time to get into it. And then in the recommend to council, so I don't know how that would proceed. I think when we have the meeting with Gabe and when I and or Carl will have the meeting with Gabe and legal, we'll get clarification on some of that. So we'll maybe leave that off. The only thing, because it's timely, the Arbor Day, if we need to have like the council, propose or, accept that or proclaim that to be a day that the city celebrates before Arbor Day, we should figure out how we do that. And everything else, I think we'll talk about next time, because that might be enough for today, unless somebody feels like in the community outreach section, we should have something we want imminently want to be doing. Okay. Should we start with energy?
Yeah, do we want to talk about what Tom and Don
Yeah,
proposed?
so let's discuss what Tom proposed and see what everybody feels.
I kind of have like a more high level question.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't expecting the EV charging to be pushed back to, I guess you said Q3 in the plan that I saw.
We had talked about it last time based
Okay.
on us not having 7 commissioners
Got it, okay.
and other things, not being able to find enough people. But I think if someone's interested in doing it and is able to work either as an independent individually or as a working pair with someone else, I think that's okay. We just we don't have the bandwidth to form a subcommittee. Or we can decide if that's urgent, we can do that.
The question that was going through my mind is, will we have enough time to meaningfully address it as part of the work plan if we don't get to it until Q3? That's
a very good question. It's just that in terms of how we're required to work under the Brown Act. So we can't form a subcommittee around it. That was what it was, I think. Unless we decide that something else between energy or forest. Third thing. The 2 energy things. We can, juggle to form it.
Do we know when the new commissioner is going to be starting? We don't have a date for that yet. Okay.
They're just gonna conduct some interviews at the end of the month, assuming they have people who show up and all that.
Yeah. Okay.
are we,
Could we be looking around our community and asking people to apply? Is the application open?
No, I think it's closed already.
The charging needs starts in Q3, then it could extend into 2026, right, and just be incorporated into that work plan as well, so. We're not necessarily limited to
Yeah,
this year.
okay. All right.
Yeah, maybe at the end of the quarter, which would be next month or beginning of next quarter, we can take a look at our schedule and see where we're at.
Mhm.
Okay, so, thoughts on the electrification?
So if I can just jump in and
Yeah.
answer Tom's question of what defines a subcommittee. The way that it's defined in the handbook is a defined purpose. And it seems like this is a defined purpose in the sense that you'll be developing recommendations in each of these categories. Is that what it sounds like? Each
Yep.
bullet gonna have recommendations. You're gonna have a final report with recommendations for each of these categories.
Yep.
So that sounds like it sounds a lot, but it's I think that can fall under one subcommittee, yes.
Yeah, and I think, we could roll in the other single person working group and make it a subcommittee, and it would be pretty comprehensive and pretty efficient.
I would support that.
My only question with this is, I guess really question I'm trying, does this then preclude us from, like, are we gonna have to be more specific the next year because this one is pretty broad in some way? I mean, we're very specific about the categories, but, I just, that part is very mystifying to me in terms of, does it set a limit in terms of, can we be this broad the next time than if we are this broad this time?
So, if I may, I think the confusion came in because I listed the work
Plan as energy, and then there were two different distinct
goals and how they were addressing it. One was via policy and the other one was via incentives. But the goal for both, which should have been maybe
a combined goal is to accelerate building electrification. Right, so.
Yeah,
so I am, so because even though it was largely labeled energy, there were two things in there that had a slightly different approach that I think optics look like, oh, we're doing too much. So if we're specifying it as this one goal,
We can adjust the work plan to reflect that and have the different topics within that.
can you give an example of what you think would be prohibited?
Well, I'm just, in terms of, it seems like we just had a subcommittee on incentives. And so I don't know if this would be council pushback that we're sort of saying we're gonna continue doing that within this larger umbrella. So I think in our original proposal, we were saying, and based on our discussions, it was gonna be more the building code side, so. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, I don't, did we get pushback on incentives? I mean, I think what happened last year is it went to council without a final recommendation. And so it wasn't well baked or prepared for that meeting. And so I think our objective here is to make sure it's all buttoned up. I don't see how you can have, I mean, quite frankly, a separate subcommittee on policy and incentives and not have conflict there and not be inefficient. So I think what Rashina said initially is right. I think it's simply the way we propose the work plan that might be causing the confusion. These are actually very similar, if not the exact same objective and goal. It's to help electrify the community.
I will have to say is that to me, a goal would be provide recommendations on reach codes to city staff. That would be a defined goal. Incentives to me don't need to be coupled with policy, because incentives would be create a program to provide each resident with $5,000, something like that, or look into incentives of what the city can provide and provide the city recommendations on how they can create programs. So if you provide recommendations on every single one of these things, as the city, we're not gonna be able to do all of those things at one time anyway. We're gonna have to piece it out. And especially if there's money involved. So if the recommendation, the end recommendation is the city should provide $500 to 20 residents who want to electrify their HVAC, then that's a monetary thing that we can only focus on. I mean, you could take it to council and be like, these are all these recommendations. Can you pick one for your fiscal year 24, 25, 26, 27? So that, I think, in my understanding of what they mean, is breaking it down to that level. So you would provide recommendations on policy, form the subcommittee, provide the report out, disband, provide the recommend, you can create another one and do it on incentives. But yeah, so that at the city level, we're gonna only be able to work on so much at one time. If that makes sense.
Well, are you suggesting then that my idea doesn't work?
I'm saying that I think it's okay. I'm not sure. It's like there's so much gray area, but
Yeah, I think,
that is how it's going to logistically play out.
no, and I think, to your point, we are very cognizant, I think we are, of city limitations and staff limitations and budgetary limitations. And so I don't think we're gonna come with a litany of items or a long list of items. I think we're gonna be pretty efficient about this, and realistic. But I struggle with how we would separate those two, and get things done efficiently. That's my only concern. We're just, we think we have about 6 months or less to try to get something done and out. And I think these goals are pretty straightforward. And so I hope we can align and form a subcommittee and start work on it so we can get it done in a timely fashion.
So I guess I can see it both ways in that there is two different approaches to getting to the same thing, one with a carrot and one with a stick. But I think it makes sense to have the two together because there has to be a way for people to have the incentive to do something so that there's not a whole lot of pushback on the policy. So they kind of go hand in hand. And I think it would be great to have a subcommittee of 3 people working on the two things. So that it doesn't, so it can be done efficiently, given that, we're already quarter of the way through the year almost. So I would recommend that we form one subcommittee. Maybe we can take some of the community engagement and the last 2 things, and I mean, we could potentially, I think we could, deprioritize those for the moment. But I'm okay with having it as is.
I fully agree with what you said and with what Tom's proposing. My only thought was actually on the community engagement. It seemed like there was some other stuff on there that could, so the process side, be overlapping, and we'd probably want to avoid that in case we decided, okay, we want to have a working pair or an individual researcher focused on the out engagement. It does say here, though, it's focused on incentives. So it is at least specific. And I do think that there needs to be engagement with the community on electrification. So I think maybe what we could do as a suggestion is look at the work plan and anywhere where there's, just make sure there's no reference to building electrification in there.
Yeah, and a clarification on the last bullet point, what are the recommendations that's gonna be provided? How is that gonna be a list of recommendations? It says work with city staff.
I don't think we know yet, Tanya. I think that's the objective of forming the working group. And or the ad hoc subcommittee, sorry. And then obviously we would work with city staff, meaning you and Nick, to talk about what your capabilities are, what you can support and what you can't support, and then come up with a list of items.
Would that be, Tom, in addition to the policy and the incentives? Or is that together with the policy and incentives?
It's really
I'm just
focused on
wondering-
it's really focused on policy and incentives. It's yeah.
I think when just the bullet that says climate action adaptation plan, that to me feels very broad. And it feels like, okay, now the subcommittee is doing everything in the cap. So
And that was that was
or giving it a different title. Maybe it's implementation plan or because if you say cap, then that feels, at least to me, just looking at it, I don't understand what that work is, and it may come off
Yeah,
as
and
being
actually-
too broad.
it's actually a poorly written bullet, quite frankly. So I think what that bullet was intended to say is we're not redoing the cap. We're not looking at the cap as a whole in this subcommittee. We're simply working in alignment with the cap, making sure every recommendation we have is in alignment with one of the cap items under electrification, not the broader cap. And that, just to make sure basically that we're in alignment with the cap. Hopefully that makes.
With that, and the way this is written, I wouldn't say that this is in like one succinct goal or defined purpose. The first three, I can see how you're making the argument, but I would say that this subcommittee is not electrification working group. I think the subcommittee's goal is providing recommendations to city on various electrification
Policies and incentives.
policies, incentives. Yeah.
Promote electrification via a combination of policies and incentives?
No, I think that this is the working, the subcommittee is
Propose proposals, come up with proposals to promote whatever.
come up with
Yeah.
is the goal is come up with recommendations for city on
Yeah.
building electrification
Incentives and policies.
and policies. Yeah, I think that's what the
Yeah, that's
subcommittee's title should be.
perfect.
Technically,
That's
it's
even
the first.
simpler.
Yeah. Because then
Yeah, I mean, I think just the title, I think is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I would just take out, I suggest the Los Altos cap,
That's fine.
so. Policy incentives and community engagement.
Yep.
So is there something we need to do in order, so are we thinking we're okay to form this subcommittee, and can we form this subcommittee? So we had talked about subcommittee formations.
Yeah, we can go ahead and you want to make a motion?
Let's hold it till we talk about everything else, because I want to be sure that,
Okay. So we
if
got one.
we're told that we can't move what we're working on, then the three commissioners will be locked to this one subcommittee till the work is done, in theory. Whatever, yeah. So we look at the other things, if somebody wants to jump ship, say to transportation.
Okay.
Or, the EV, whatever, charging network.
I think that's a great question is when would we start with that? Could we have uncertainty about a new commissioner coming on board? That would be a good time, I think, to maybe start with some individual research on that. My anxiety is mainly around the transportation one and when we would actually get to that, because that's going to could be 6 months or longer from now. where everyone else is tied up in the subcommittee.
Yeah.
Yes, and then we're kind of already force fitting whoever's a new commissioner to an area because everything else is kind of filled up. But let's go through it. So after energy, we have the green community and we have the working pair. Should we continue as that working pair or should we be forming a subcommittee on that? With
It seems to make sense that, or Tom and Don and Cole, they're in this subcommittee since we already started working on.
On that. I don't think you can do individual research anymore if that.
right, yeah, so that, all that work is tied into one and it's. Yeah, so I'm just talking about the green community, the urban forest master plan, urban forest and ecosystem master plan.
Yeah, I think it is this question of whether we'd be able to change out that is the tension right now. I mean, I think. Or also if we could add another member, you know, if we can go ahead and cement it as a 2-person subcommittee, you know, I think that would be fine. If we're the flexibility to add another after, but if not, then yeah, that's tough.
Would you want to continue working as a working pair to clarify? And that has to be a very specific, more specific action, right? Working pair.
Yes, it needs to be a specific action. Of a component of this goal, of this project. But to answer your question, someone coming in later, I think is different than current members moving around. If
Right.
someone comes in later and you need to add them to a subcommittee, I think that's fine if it stays within the rules, but so I don't think we need to worry too much about that.
Yeah.
They'll just be added on to wherever they fit.
Okay.
Well, I was wanting to be on that subcommittee as well, but I'm feeling for 2 reasons.
One that I think that
I've spent some time on this work in the past,
Right.
and then
so then it would be the 3 of us continuing again, like would be kind of a continuation, and then I may have
a conflict of interest because
my property abuts a creek, so if there is
detailed discussion on creek. So maybe it's okay, I would not go on it because, and so
then there's no problem with
the 2 of you started the subcommittee,
and if the 7th commissioner wants to join that, they might be able to.
so.
So what is the goal of subcommittee? So you might want to continue as a working pair until we define the goal.
Yeah, I think that
Is
sounds
that
good.
not a sufficient goal? It's
Which
a very specific goal.
which
Develop urban forest and ecosystem restoration master plan.
are you planning to develop the master? I think
Well,
the
That's not reflective of the
Yeah, no,
previous
that's not,
conversation.
yeah, no, that's not, sorry, go ahead.
Well,
Why don't you speak to it?
I think the idea was to try to propose like who we sort of contract out, like sort of figuring out that aspect of the process and sort of setting what are the goals that we see as the city should do for this, not going the length
Yeah,
of
yeah,
actually
right.
forming a whole plan.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you can do the RFP. You can,
Right.
That's what, and I think the library of the subcommittee where they came up with an RFP for something.
Right.
So that would be develop
Right.
an RFP for an urban forest master plan.
Right. Yeah. So you know, at this point, I think we're still in that exploratory phase in
Mhm.
terms of what would actually be the goals of such an RFP. So, you know, that, and I do think that has been stated in some terms before on this particular item, but, so, yeah.
So the subcommittee would be exploring what that would go into the RFP,
Right.
right?
So I
Yeah.
think
So
what
then-
we've listed
Yeah, we will
here,
provide justification, why do we need that? Right? You know, some of the data to support our canopy loss over the years, over time, and what the city can do. I think we need to provide that because we'll be asking for budget. There needs to be a budget planning to develop the plan, right? The RFP, basically, we're gonna get a proposal and that's we need money to
Correct.
implement that.
So let me jump in. So if you look at the notes, the phase 2 and phase 3, I think would be what the subcommittee would do, which is do what you said, canopy analysis and green space inventory. And then the second part is set the goal, scope, and budget, and identify, work with staff to identify, put together the RFP. And look for investigate funding partners. And then the phase 4, and I misspoke. The master plan would be further down the line. It's next year or the year after.
Yeah.
So it's a very specific goal there, in my opinion.
Yeah, and just to add to what Commissioner Liu said is, it sounded like at the meeting, council wasn't sold on the urban forest master plan, or they felt that the tree protection was, it sounds like there was a little bit of confusion there.
Yeah,
So
what they mentioned last
If
time,
you
when we met with
want the
them.
working, if you want the subcommittee to do all this research and then bring it to council's recommendation of, we want to go out to bid for this work, that it could be that as well.
I recall maybe is Council Weiber. He said maybe the tree ordinance is already sufficient. So
I think,
his understanding of,
I mean, I watched that back afterwards. I think the point he was making is, hey, we have this tree protection ordinance. How does this figure into what you guys are trying to achieve? It was a scope clarity.
yeah,
I could be wrong. I just
think
took his
it's
comment at
scope.
face
I
value.
think it's the
Actually,
scope.
And if we had time to discuss it, we would have talked about how that was phase 1, and then we
Yeah.
need to build on that. So what council member Ligor said is that we can move on with our work plan, assuming that it's approved. And then if we hear something different, then we adjust accordingly. We don't have to wait.
Yeah.
So
I think it would be helpful from the city standpoint is to have like a report that says, we want to do this, this is why, this is what it would look like, this is how much it would cost. This is what other cities have done, kind of like what staff does for city council when we prepare a recommendation. I think that would be helpful. Then we take that internally to upper management and so on and so forth. And I think that's the usual process of what they're used to. So I think if that's what the subcommittee is working on, or the working group, to start with, to get the ball rolling, maybe that outline will be helpful.
Another proposal I have is that maybe while we're waiting for clarification and continue as a working pair, and then make it an official subcommittee with a specific goal at the next meeting that everybody says yes. I don't think it would change what would get done.
I don't think it makes any difference. It gives us more flexibility, honestly, to wait a month, so it doesn't really matter. But if we, when I'm sure there's a time when they want to see the subcommittee submitted, and so it's certainly one that we could today if we wanted to.
There's something else is that people are raising awareness of fire resilience for our community. They may want us to incorporate some of the things into this overall urban forest plan.
Yeah.
To promote fire resiliency.
Yeah.
And we may not have enough element right now, and they may want to see that. So I feel we do as a working group until you get official approval for the work plan. They may want us to add some more thing, and then we can formally form subcommittee with a very defined goal.
So how do we communicate back to the commission the discussion with the city manager and with Vice Chair Ligor? Do we have to wait till the next?
We can agendize it today. We can say that.
Okay, but
It'll-
we
we'll
will have to
add it
wait
as a
till that
potential.
meeting, even if to communicate that back to So if, for
We
example,
can talk today, we can say a potential future agenda item is debriefing on the conversation with the city manager and.
well, I guess my question was, if, say, for example, next week we meet and we get the guidance that this needs to change a certain way,
Well, I guess not, because we're gonna be
sending the memo to council, may have to wait for feedback.
Take that back.
I know.
I was just wondering
It's
if we
very-
get some input from Councilmember Fligor and the city manager next week that changes what we are doing, we're planning on doing here. Are we allowed to communicate it back?
Are you allowed to communicate it back to the affected working group before the next meeting?
The working group, yes, but it wouldn't be, like Lisa said, it wouldn't be able to go back to the commission, so the points that we agree on today would. Like the commission is gonna say, like, we're gonna agree on these points, and then you, both of you, or whoever's decided to work on that, will work on it, and then you, that group and I, can, yes, discuss that, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So it sounds like the urban forest is gonna come back in April. Okay.
Yeah.
Is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Yep.
Tom?
Did you hear me?
We're at 0 subcommittees right now.
No, well, we formed one.
Official.
We formed
Wait,
one.
I thought we were gonna form the electrification subcommittee. Is that not on the agenda today? We can't do that?
No, we
No.
It
haven't formed
sounded
it
like-
yet, sorry,
It sounds.
we said we would hold off
Yeah.
into it in case somebody wants to jump ship.
Okay,
In case one of the three of you wants to jump ship. And how do we do with the
Don's not here. You can sign in and then.
I think he'll be okay with being on
I think
the.
so, yeah.
We
you're
can,
ready.
but we can assign him as a point of order without him agreeing to it, right?
I'm pretty sure he wants to be on it.
I think he wants, I think.
We don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, I think he wants
Exactly.
to be on, so,
Okay.
okay, next subcommittee.
Transportation. So in the plan, we had proposed a subcommittee for the EV charging master plan, which we had set completion by Q3 2025 and
ad hoc subcommittee to go into it. However, given that we would have 3 + 2 people.
assigned, well, so that's something, if somebody wants to urgently work on that,
We can talk about it.
I'm okay with holding it off, pushing it off until we have our 7th commissioner.
And technically, you're unassigned right
Yeah,
now,
so
right?
technically, by next meeting, we'll meet the cap of subcommittees. Without. And then it'll just be you unassigned.
Yeah.
I can't find forms of
Somebody for myself.
You can be an individual research.
I'll be
lots of working groups. We'll figure out.
So that's why I'm not choosing to.
So you can form you can form a subcommittee, and then the extra person will just join you on that.
I don't think we need to do that,
We'll keep it open.
Okay.
because I don't want to assume what they would want to work on, have the expertise on. So my suggestion is to hold off forming a subcommittee until we have 7th. And then the other transportation thing, which is with liaisons. We just talked about, and this was, we chatted with Vice Chair Fligor on this, that it's not our, we shouldn't be forming a subcommittee on this because it's not something that we're doing. So working as liaisons with the streets and the planning commission is okay. We could have one person being liaison to both if it makes sense and shopping most, or one of us wants to do something else.
I think Don is going to with the planning, right?
I was gonna be with planning, John,
Oh,
you had volunteered to be
Complete
with
street, yeah.
complete streets.
yeah.
But what I'm saying is. If it makes sense, I could be both, or if it makes sense, you could be both, or. Or if you feel like.
You can be
want
both.
that,
You can be both. Yeah, I think it's hard to separate because,
It might
right?
be easier to. take
Yeah,
the
just
same,
one person, right?
Is that okay?
Can I be liaison to both the complete streets and the planning commission?
Yeah.
For now, okay, let's do that, make it simpler and.
Mhm.
Maybe then. Whatever happens on transportation, I could continue working on that.
I hadn't understood the walkable and bikeable city. I get that. With the electric shuttle program.
This
Is it the plan?
This is under shared mobility,
Oh, okay.
so. Instead of everyone driving, we can have maybe a
Yeah.
shuttle there, so people driving together.
And which other commission? Was
This
that
would
in
be
this?
the planning commission,
Plan commission.
and the first thing would be planning commission and complete streets.
And the complete streets.
I think they would both be. a little bit.
And do we know if they have it in their work plan for this year? They don't.
The CSC generally, that's like in their master plan.
Yeah.
Kind of generally, but it's not something they're working on this year.
Okay. So it's going to be more the walkable and bikeable city side of things.
Well, this is just a proposal, so we're gonna.
Maybe look at what potential route might be useful if, that's something that's.
I think Complete Street has a few work plan. I was, listening to the February 25 city council. So they were meeting with the council that night. And they were presenting, I think there are 3 or 4 priorities.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, so.
they may, yeah, I believe they have work plan.
So do we want to officially form the subcommittee for the electrification recommendations?
Are we done? Yeah, so and then the last thing on resource conservation, I'll continue. And then the other things are, we'll talk about next time, I think. So yeah, I think unless somebody wants to jump ship and onto any other ship. What do we do? Do I make a motion? I propose that we form a subcommittee, an ad hoc subcommittee, comprising Commissioners Nee, Whedon, and Hecht to work on putting together recommendations for building electrification with a combination of policy incentives and community engagement.
Okay, a second.
I'll second.
Okay. If you could just hop on your camera and everyone can say, everyone agree, raise your hand. Tom?
Do you see me?
Oh, I see it, okay.
Could you back it up a
Okay.
little bit?
All right, so I'm
There
just,
you go.
I.
Sorry.
Great, so I'm gonna start taking the time to kind of ensure I summarize what the action items are of every meeting, of every item. So we formed a subcommittee, for policy incentives, community engagement recommendations. Urban forest subcommittee, is not formed, it's still a working group and it'll come back in April. And, we're changing, Commissioner Liu from being the CSC liaison to, Chair Humayun. And, okay. Other than that,
And
all the
we're-
working
yeah,
groups and
yeah.
individual pairs are staying the same as what's in the meeting notes. Okay. Great.
I guess I won't be an individual researcher for the incentives.
Yeah.
So
Whatever
it's like
changes
yeah, and
mentioned.
there will no longer be an individual person working for.
Okay. So are we good with the work line?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Commissioners' reports and comments.
Do you want to talk about the memo and the points?
Yes. Okay, so the memo to put together for council. We'll have the updated. Work plan with the assignments that we have currently. And we will have, request for, approval of that work plan. Or any changes, recommended. It will have, going through the work plan, the budget items that are listed in the notes. It will have a formal request for that budget. Since nobody, we don't have any additional proposals for budget, at least we'll start with that. And it will have, the one, no. And then answers to comments. That came up at the joint meeting. Clarifying, the urban forest master plan differentiating how that's different from the tree protection ordinance. And taking, and then clarifying that the transportation liaisons are not going to be making policy recommendations. They're just going to be advising and participating at with the other commissions, their liaisons too. What else was there? Yes, and clarifying that the cap update is not a major cap update. It's a requirement in our obligations and duties, and it will not be something that we propose to do, but we'll review and present to the council at their next meeting. I think that was what I had intended on my list. Is there anything anybody else wants to add, take away? What was the first one? Ask for, update the work plan and ask for approval.
So we have update the work plan, ask for approval, budget items, answer to comments at joint meeting, clarify commission liaisons will not be providing recommendations. Clarifying the cap update is not a major update, but
It's not update, we're not updating it. It's just proposals, yeah, yeah.
I didn't really understand. I'm not sure if I understood that one. You didn't mean updating the cap plan, you meant you're referring to the duties and
Yes.
the duties and.
Yes,
and
it's,
everything. Okay,
it's
That
one of our
response
duties
to-
to look at the cap and annually propose changes, additions, deletions, priorities.
Was that in response to Councillor Weinberg's comment in the work plan?
Yes,
review?
yes.
Yeah,
He was wondering why we wanted to update the cap. But it's
So
not,
it's
it's
not-
not a major update, it's just proposals, this is what we think
yeah, yeah.
needs to change.
because the cap does say update in 2025, so it's not that, right?
It's not that update because I'm behind on that.
Okay.
Okay, does anyone want to add to that, any points to that memo, and does the commission give you two? Chair Mayan and Vice Chair Van Race the ability to write that and meet with whoever they need to meet with to be able to write that letter.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, now. We can close that. Hopefully that's the last time we're talking big picture. Okay, Commissioner reports and comments, council meetings.
Right, so I think the February 25. What is related with the environmental area is the vice mayor, she recently attended Santa Clara County about emergency preparedness, particularly they want to prioritize the fire resilience for our community. And she pointed out a few things, a few points about the home hardening. So that, you know, will involve like building material that are fire retardant, and also like the clearing of any, you know, flammable things within 100 feet of the perimeter of the house. And the windows, you know, what kind of material, the roofing. I think it's just I think that area probably will be more, maybe there will be code into planning, I think, you know, for any kind of remodel or new constructions kind of thing. But environmentally, I think, you know, the trees and the shrubs and, you know, those kind of things. Also about the parks, you know, there are protection there in place, just in case, like firewalls or sprinklers and things like that. They also talk about they talk about the eucalyptus trees. You know, there are people proposed to remove, but it's not the opinion. I think there are, you know, some of these trees are 40s, 50 years, and, you know, they do have their use. Probably questions and canopy and stuff like that. So, the other thing is also that's more or less like, you know, advised our city should set aside an emergency fund, because when some disaster happens, sometimes right now, probably getting a FEMA is going to take a while longer time. The city needs to be prepared for that. Yeah, I think that's in general. I think that's what related to environmental areas.
Yeah. I attended the March 11th meeting. Right before the official meeting, Parks, Art, Recreation, and Cultural Commission presented their work plan. I think it's worth noting that their work plan only mentions arts and events. They don't actually talk about the park, like the status of it. So environmentally, I think it would appear to be a gap to me. But there was also a brief mention at the end there of someone who's interested in building a community garden in Los Altos. And the mayor also made a comment of trying to think about what are the things that could be built to appeal to young people to get them off their screens, out of their houses, and a skate park was mentioned in there. So I would consider that environmentally connected, considering it's great infrastructure. So that's why I wanted to raise that. There was a public hearing in 3 parts trying to overturn the CEQA exemption that was made for the addition happening for the library. Those were based on the Historical Commission, the Planning Commission, and then the actual significance that they were claiming that the extension was significant and thus couldn't be CEQA exempt. So all 3 of those were denied. Don't need to go into details further, but and that side is all just trying to protect the orchard. So difference of opinion on that matter. The other big item was underground utilities that was presented as a policy of we want to pretty much always, you know, try to get utilities undergrounded, barring PG&E saying we literally can't. A couple public commenters came up and said, I've done this and it is very expensive. And that led council to go, maybe we should think about this more. And so they directed Nick to look into the matter further to come back on that. And then the final thing that was related, again, another just sort of mention thrown out there, the mayor apparently did a hike and saw a lot of what he considered brown fuel in the hills, and was worried that it would explode. It was his words, noting the dead oak there. So some proposal will come out of that to be considered.
Any other general updates with your work or any new work or?
Maybe I'll send it to you. Share it. I had an event to share, but I forgot which, I lost it in my email, so I will share it with Tanya. Hopefully she can share it with everyone else. It's, I think, in Palo Alto, pertaining to resilience landscape, I think. Anybody else? Tom? Colin?
Nothing from my side. I don't know if Tanya, you have an update on bird safety or lighting ordinance and the next steps, or if it's still on hold?
I haven't received any updates.
Okay.
Tom, I copy you. So I just sent to our liaison at Council of Legal, asking her to meet her to advise us about next steps. A couple of days ago. I haven't heard back from her. I think that's what we were being advised late last year, that waiting for her to meet with us.
Do we have any update on the RFP for?
Yeah, I can give
But that's
myself
gonna be, yeah,
updates,
okay.
but any other
We'll let you.
commission? Alright, so I do have an updates. Share my screen. Okay. So this is kind of like the end of Q1. So I'll just give various updates on what I'm working on and what we've been working on. So SVCE released a competitive decarbonization grant, and the city decided to explore the idea of preparing an application for rooftop solar projects. And I enlisted help from Commissioner Hecht due to his experience with solar. So we've been working on that and trying to get an application going. And that relates to cap item 4.2B to install ground or roof mounted solar panels for select city buildings in Greeting City operations. So right now the grant is due on March 28th. So we're hustling to kind of get that all together and have a solid proposal submitted. Okay. And then the building electrification RFP that has been issued on our RFP website called Planet Bids. And so we're currently accepting proposals on that. The municipal fleet electrification plan. And we're accepting proposal until 4/7/2025, in case anyone is wondering or asking. For the municipal fleet electrification plan, so following a very detailed process, I'm happy to announce that that's finally complete and finalized. So I just wanted to acknowledge the support from SVCE's Technical Assistance Program that it was a unique program and they only allowed, I think, 7 or 8 cities to participate, and I jumped on that opportunity and we were able to do that. So we've been working on it, and there's been substantial contribution from the Parks Department, particularly the fleet manager and the maintenance staff, technicians who provided me a lot of the technical expertise to coordinate and get that plan fleshed out. So the next steps would be to report out to the city manager and city council that this plan is complete and send it to them. So happy to send that plan out to all of you after the meeting. But that is exciting news. And so the MSC EVI project, which also kind of came from this technical assistance with SBCE. So that is for us to do planning for EVI at MSC for current and future fleet. That's where all of the city, not all, that is where a lot of the city's fleet is housed. So we went through a whole process again with SBCE's consultant and through the technical assistance program to get designs, to meet with PG&E, to see how many chargers are needed for electrifying by 2030 if we were, to, I think it's 2035 to get all our fleet electrified. So the next step after that, seeing that PG&E has a program for EV fleets where we can get incentives and they'll pay for everything up to the meter. So all the infrastructure up to the meter. I applied for that application and we're accepted into the application. The next steps for that would be for us to finalize and accept their contract and then move forward to go out to bid for construction for behind the meter work, which is installing the infrastructure and chargers on city property, which we are as a city in charge of. And in that we will get incentives from PG&E towards our costs, the behind the meter costs, in addition to them installing and inputting all the to the meter infrastructure. So that's also exciting and something that's moving forward. So with the single-use plastic foodware, work on that is not finished. So I worked with our graphic designer to create a business postcard to send out to all the businesses to let them know that the city passed and adopted those ordinances. The changes will be coming in June and December for them to start, making those changes for their takeout and dine-in requirements. I also presented to the Chamber of Commerce and all the businesses to let them know that it was adopted and kind of do a refresher on the requirements. And then we also posted in the Los Altos business newsletter and the MTWS newsletter on that. And the work on that hopefully is businesses, if they need support, they can reach out to me and we can kind of work with them one-on-one on what support they will need and kind of assess that and see how that will go in the future. And then other departments and divisions that have been working on stuff that touch sustainability is the solar lights, like 30+ solar lights installed in downtown. I think I mentioned that last time, but there's more planned. There are now 2 water refill stations at Lincoln Park and more planned, and that is also a CAP action item. I can't remember the actual goal right now. There's new EV chargers at the community center parking lot, right over here. They just put new ones in. I think there's a total of 16. And then there's some planned for Mackenzie Park. They're planning e-bike chargers and lockers in downtown. And Grant Park Community Center is getting some retrofits, so they'll have electric heat pumps and so both HVAC and water heaters. And then some potential future projects I've done research on and exploring is directed elected pay through the IRA program. That is still a federal program and it sounds like it'll stay for a while. It sounds like it's hard to take down. So that is basically city, like jurisdictions and organizations like cities who can get direct pay on certain projects. For example, EV chargers. Unfortunately, the city of Los Altos doesn't qualify because we're not considered an underserved community, so we don't qualify. But cities can put in EV chargers and then get direct payback if they file a tax. If they a tax return. So I'm looking into that. That would require a whole process with finance and stuff, but it would allow us to get some direct money back from our EV charging, or sorry, our EV purchases. And if we do get the solar grant, it would allow us to get some money back for that as well. And then the Bay Run Energy Road Mapping is energy road mapping for city buildings. And we're potentially exploring that, and likely to move forward with auditing some of our buildings and doing that. So more to come on all of that. Those are updates. Any clarifying questions? No discussion, just clarifying questions.
Okay, potential future agenda items is next. So I would like to propose to, hopefully it will be next month, make a presentation on deconstruction, and we can maybe keep it separate, is to invite it may be at the same time, the reuse people to give us a little presentation on their work around deconstruction. They have something that talks about the benefits of deconstruction and their details, which I think should be interesting. So.
Alright, is everyone okay? with
Two separate agenda items that may happen at the same time if we can work it.
And then I don't know if we would be ready for the next meeting, but certainly in the following meeting, I think we would give an update our subcommittee, our recently formed subcommittee. I don't know if we need to agendize that or not, but
Yes, so you think you're gonna have if you're just gonna have an update that doesn't require any commission action, it doesn't need to be agendized. But
okay,
if you think that you will have like an action that the commission should vote on, or you need specific feedback from the commission, then it should be agendized.
okay, fair enough. I think we're fine for next meeting, and then potentially the following one, we would ask for feedback.
Yeah, the other one was we spoke with Silicon Valley Clean Energy about giving an update to the commission on their full service program. And I think we spoke to them about doing that in April. So if we agree that we want to get that presentation, which I think would be very good for the commission to hear, then
Yeah. Before the,
Yeah.
or the county there.
Is this different from the SBC update that's on our potential future agenda?
I think that's where it came from.
That was way back, I think, from just getting a general update from SBC, so this is
A
different.
separate update on their.
Yeah, so SBC update on the full service program, we can put that as a potential future agenda item, yeah. Any other one?
Certainly have. I don't think that, the only thing is that the EV fair, I don't know that there's a discussion either that needed, but wouldn't hurt.
April will be the last.
It'll be the last one, so
So you want to?
so it'd be fine to have a discussion, and I'll, yeah. We can certainly come to that, trying to see, ask the group if they have, what questions they have for the commission.
And then the other one was the
Yeah,
urban forest. Do we need to agendize that?
I don't know how you're feeling, Stephanie. I feel like we could wait off, could
You
hold
may
off.
be very busy with the EV fair. Yeah,
I think there's
I think we
enough
can-
research to do that we
Yeah.
could just do the short update at the end,
Yeah,
and
we'll do that.
but try to aim for May.
Yeah.
Yeah,
same here.
so no
Okay.
need to.
So reuse presentation and so there's two,
Deconstruction presentation.
okay. Reuse presentation, deconstruction presentation, and SVC.
Okay, the reuse people, that's where the reuse comes from, yes. Yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
And if you can give me their names so that I can put that on the agenda with their names. And then SVC update for the full service program and the electrification event, which is now called Living Electric.
There.
Okay. Is everyone okay with that? Tom, if you can hop on your camera and show a hand. Okay. All right,
It doesn't have to be everyone, right? It's just needs to be 3 people and technically.
correct, yeah, you're right.
Yes.
It needs to be a majority, I think. Yeah.
Future agenda item, I think it needs to be, doesn't need to be a majority.
Okay.
I think it needs 3 people's, 2, yeah, some
Sounds
support.
like everyone.
Yeah, but
supporting.
just
Okay.
for,
Great. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
thank you so much. Sorry we ran over, but only half an hour.